Senator Bernie Sanders said on Meet the Press he asked if he's a capitalist. He said, no, I'm a democratic socialist. What do you think, as someone who's almost certainly a capitalist, what the role of the government should be in regulating the economy?
Well, I am a capitalist, and I've created tremendous numbers of jobs and lots of education for families and health care for families and other things. And Bernie Sanders is a socialist, and he's trying to soften it by saying he's a Democrat and a socialist, but he's really a socialist. He's always said socialist before. Now he's changing it. He wants to go a little bit more mainstream. But that is a short road to failure for this country. That's why I don't think he can be elected, because when you have somebody who's an admitted socialist, and some people think he's even worse than that, he's the next step. But if you're a socialist running for office in this country, I don't see it happening.
What's the next step, Donald? What's the next step past socialism? It'd be communism, right? So what are you saying? Well, he's not saying it, as he just laid it out. You know, some people say, it's not necessarily me saying it, but some people say he's worse than socialist. He's the next step. He's a communist. Some people say Bernie's a communist. Is he a communist? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there in the interview, bro. You asked me the question. What? Back off. No, of course, that's absurd. Bernie Sanders is not a communist. Bernie Sanders is not even a socialist. I mean, again, if you actually listen to socialists or you go by the definition of socialism, he's just not a socialist. So there's an article today which lays out actual socialists who are like, yeah, the guy's a sellout. He's not a socialist. Because it depends what definition you use. And, you know, the one that it has the pejorative associated with it, the one that has a negative connotation, is the one that's like, you know, the bridge between capitalism and communism. And there are plenty of socialists who really do want to nationalize virtually every industry or most industries, or if not that, they do want to set up a system which is more anti-capitalist. Whereas a guy like Bernie Sanders, he's not anti-capitalist. Neither am I, to be clear, because a lot of people would wrongly tar me with being a socialist or whatever. That's actually not the case, and this is why Bernie says he's a democratic socialist. I prefer, and the term means the same thing, but it's social democrat, or another term for it is welfare statist, which just means you're in favor of some industries being funded via tax dollars, so being public, and other industries being private and regulated. And it's just a matter of where you fall on that spectrum. So, like I said, there's one definition which has a negative connotation to it of socialism, which is, you know, the bridge on the way to communism, and the other definition, which doesn't have nearly as much of a negative connotation associated with it, is just government, period. And if you take that understanding of it, pretty much everybody's a socialist to one degree or another. So if you're in favor of the police department, if you're in favor of the fire department, if you're in favor of public roads, if you're in favor of having a public military, well then, yeah, you're a socialist to some extent. Perhaps you're further to the right on that spectrum, where you only want 3%, 5% of the things in a given economy to be public, to be socialist, but you would be a 5% socialist. And for somebody like Bernie, somebody like myself, we're just more in the middle of that spectrum where we say, it depends on the thing. Let's use our brains here. Sometimes, you know, you want to privatize something because there's a better outcome. So when it comes to material goods, when it comes to video games, you don't want the state making video games. Couches, you don't want the government making couches. You know, clothes, you don't want the government making clothes. Cars, same thing. You want that to be in the private sector. But healthcare, education, necessities like that, well, that absolutely should be the government. That absolutely should be socialist. So it's a spectrum thing. But let's look a little deeper into this here, though, Donald. Because you're tarring him with, well, he's just a socialist and that's bad for the country. Remember when you said, well, I don't want to cut Social Security, I don't want to cut Medicare, I don't want to cut Medicaid. You said something along the lines of, I want to bring so many jobs into this country that we don't need to cut those programs. Okay, then you're a socialist in the same way that Bernie is on that one. There's your socialism, a social safety net. That is socialism according to one of the definitions. How about when you said you wanted to raise taxes on the hedge fund guys? That's almost, or not even almost, that's only the exact thing that Bernie's advocating for too. So on that one, you agree with him, and on that one, you're more socialist. You want to tax them and take that money, bring it in as revenue to the government, and then do X, Y, or Z with it. Socialist! All right. How about when you advocated for universal health care? Now, not only did you do that a long time ago, which that's been widely reported. He also said it recently in the 60 Minutes interview out of the blue. He was like, let's repeal, replace Obamacare, and we'll take care of people with subsidies. Well, that's a more liberal plan than Obamacare. And I agree with you on that, too. I prefer a more liberal plan than Obamacare. So, also, socialist, according to one definition, and you agree with Bernie on those things. The only areas where you disagree with him, apparently, are on social issues, where you're damn near fascist, and on universal education, where I haven't heard, you say anything about how that should be totally government funded and people shouldn't have massive amounts of student loan debt. So on some issues, Donald, going by your own words, you actually agree with Bernie Sanders. So are you a socialist or are you a step further? Now, again, the thing is, I don't believe Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump believes Donald Trump. Nobody knows what the fuck he'd do. He's a loose cannon, and he's incredibly not trustworthy. So whether or not you believe him is a separate question. All I'm saying is, by his own words, some of the time, he agrees with Bernie Sanders on some key things here. And if Bernie is a step beyond socialism, if he's a communist, then Donald Trump is a communist.